possibly know about confronting the greatest threat to the survival of our species. Primitive, antiquated, that's how we tend to see rural people. But I believe indigenous farmers, herders, and fisherfolk know more about how to adapt to change through their surroundings than maybe all of us in this room, because they have to adapt. About 3 years ago, we went to this community. It's called Yangsila, and it's located in the tropical foothills of eastern Nepal, to understand what was the nature of this indigenous knowledge system, and how did it relate to the more formal, quote-unquote, scientific knowledge. We were absolutely mesmerized by what we found. These farmers may not have had a university degree. In fact, they may never have even stepped into school, but they could read every single shade of green in the forest. Every tree, every vine, every fern, every root was a different medicine, a source of fuel or fodder, or a building material, or a pigment. There were men in their 70s that could just fly up the tree. They could climb the tree and fetch rare medicines. There were women that could take a dozen plants and mix them into concoctions that could treat ear infections. And it was clear that necessity was actually the creator of this knowledge. There are no supermarkets, there are no grocery stores, no hardware stores. The forest was their pharmacy. And it was also clear that this was the kind of knowledge that no single person could accumulate in one lifetime. It was the kind of knowledge that came about from being deeply embedded in nature and really being there. Seeing the same tree in the same place, generation after generation, literally hundreds of attributes start to become clear. The shape of the leaves, when the birds land on the branches, what the flowers smell like and what they look like, the curvature of the seeds. And I believe that this knowledge was not just the gateway to adaptation, but it was actually the essence of their survival. We further realized that the vastness of this knowledge was actually tied to the heterogeneity of the landscape. So as you went across this topographic rise, every 50 or 100 meters, you were in a new microclimate. And each of these microclimates had its own associated species and its own associated knowledge, and different farmers who lived there. We started to think, well, what if you could create a corridor across Yangsila that linked all of these different microclimates as you went up the mountain, and you could learn about all of this biodiversity. And then we started to imagine further. And we thought, what if you went to the plains, to Kanchenjunga at 8,586 meters? Only Everest and K2 are taller. And imagine this 8,000-meter vertical gradient, 6,700 flowers. Imagine all of the birds you would encounter, all of the species you could learn about. Imagine going to Koshitapu, Nepal's largest Ramsar site and its first Ramsar site, to learn about 485 aquatic bird species and the endangered wild water buffalo from somebody like Rajkumar Singh. Never went to university, but he can tell you about all of these birds there. Imagine going to Yangsila and learning about endangered pangolins, or 550 medicinal and aromatic plant species. Going further up to Kuruletenupa, this is a village where 150 natural springs have died in just the last 3 years. But these people are adapting, they're finding the ways. Imagine going to Kurule and learning about how they're doing it. Or going further up to Chowki in the Tinjure Milke Jaljale, which is one of the rhododendron hotspots of the world. 28 out of 32 species found in Nepal are found in this one forest. There are trees that are thousands of years old and plants that treat cancer. And imagine going to Thudam, learning about snow leopard, red panda, blue sheep, and about these pastoralists, these nomads who have lived with this biodiversity for generations and how they've done it. Finally landing in Kanchenjunga to learn about the cryosphere itself. This is our vertical university. But we're not just dreaming it or rendering it. For the last 3 years, we've actually been building it. From engaging local youth to document the knowledge of their elders, of their own parents and grandparents through an indigenous knowledge portal, to actually taking the children out into nature and taking them into the fields and the rivers and the springs through our outdoor education program, which targets 6th graders in local villages. We are now actually even building the 6 campuses of the Vertical University, each of which is tied to the 6 climate zones of the country, which also happen to be the 6 climate zones found on our planet. And we are proving that conservation can be a rural employment generator. So we started with just 2 volunteers, and today we have 106 employees. 48% of them are women. 86% of them work in the villages where they're from. But this biodiversity is at risk, and local people, these staff actually have been safeguarding the land in these communities, which is being threatened by land grabbing. We've protected 300 acres in our community land trust in 33 different locations from across this gradient, which links much larger landscapes. It's done by local people. And today, we are actually moving from community-level conservation to landscape-level conservation, as we're creating a 176,000-acre conservation area that will link the 3rd and 5th tallest peaks in the world, literally our highest learning grounds. We've done all of this with just 560,000 euros. There was times where we had $0 in the bank. But when we started to think what would happen if we lost this biodiversity, the survival of these indigenous people itself was at stake, and we didn't give up. Now we are on a campaign to try to raise 2 million euros so that we can realize the full dream of this project. We can build the 6 campuses, which will cost about half of that. We can actually also employ 600 rural people in the Vertical University, and we can create our 180-kilometer plant trail that will go along this gradient with just that much money. Consider that local farmers, local youth, local fisher people, ordinary people are leading this project, and they had the audacity to call it their university. So I ask you again, what does a single farmer possibly know about fighting the greatest threat of our age? Thank you.